So I got this at a library sale where the local library every now and then, I guess, to raise money. I don't think it's just stuff they have, but they accumulate a whole lot of books, and then they have a book sale. So and I picked this up at the book sale. I haven't really even looked at it yet. It's called The Civil War of Visual History. And it still has the original price sticker on it, but at the library book sale, it was much cheaper. I think it's funny if you look at this sticker though. Look at the massive savings. It was originally $15.99, but it's on special for $15.97. You save 2 whole cents. I just find that really funny. But anyway, it says rare treasures from the vaults of the Library of Congress and the National Archives. I see right here there's a picture of General Custer. The Civil War visual history showcases rare images from the United States' greatest internal conflict, newly discovered artifacts, and recently enhanced classic photographs from the front lines are brought to life through the words of the soldiers and the civilians who were there. Letters, speeches, and memoirs capture the emotions of those who experienced the Civil War, along with images from photographers, sketch artists, and reporters. So, and it says there's a DVD that examines the Battle of Gettysburg in detail and provides a visual and captivating record of those who braved the dangers of the war. It's got the little elastic thingy here, and on the front we got some tinted pictures of I would guess that these are all Confederates. I'm just guessing here from these pictures, but it's hard to tell because the ones on top are not in a uniform that's particularly obvious. We got a belt buckle there. I can't make out if it's even Confederates often would wear a U.S. belt buckle, but I think these are all Confederates. So when you open it up, the DVD just fell out. There's the Civil War of Visual History, Rare Images and Tales of the War Between the States. It's got a picture of the New York Times, a little daguerreotype, some kind of cross-stitching thing, and a sword. Actually, I have that paper, that very one right there. I might have shown it in another video. And then there's this book. This is a detail from a painting I'm familiar with. It's from the Battle of Shiloh, this painting. I recognize and I've been to that battlefield in Tennessee. I didn't even make sure there is a DVD in here. Oh, there is. Let's check it out. Make sure it's in good shape. It looks to be in pretty good shape. Might be fun to watch. And then there's this book. It feels like it's still pretty new and good shape. Very shiny. It says it's pictures of artifacts, so I'm kind of interested to see what's going to be in here. So that looks like a picture of Lincoln delivering his inaugural address. Talking about the social climate at the times. That definitely led to the separation and division between the two halves of the country. Fort Sumter. I went to Fort Sumter not that long ago. It is, and it's funny. It's a good little ways from Charleston. You had to take a ferry to get to it. And when you're there, you do feel quite isolated away. I always sort of envisioned it was so much closer, like you could see it, but it's a long way away. And then when you get to it, it's very small, and the fort is still there, and the rubble and everything is still so much just like, I mean, like this. They haven't really changed it. They sort of kept it the way it was. It's really interesting. Yeah, this is the last charge of the Battle of Shiloh. At the time of the Battle of Shiloh in 1862, it was the largest battle in the West. I think it was the largest battle in the Western Hemisphere at the time it was fought. The Battle of Shiloh was doesn't get a lot of attention, oddly enough. When we think about the Civil War, we think about Gettysburg, we think about Bull Run, and the other battles though that were very significant that don't get as much attention are Shiloh and Antietam. Those two battles were very significant. Shiloh started out as a Confederate victory and then became a Union victory. Partly because the Confederate commander Albert Sidney Johnston was killed, and his subordinate Beauregard took over, and secondly, when Ulysses S. Grant, when they hesitated and allowed Grant to show up with more men and win the battle. When I was in Fort Sumter and some of these other forts, you saw I think this is a Columbiad. You see these big cannons. I think they're called Columbiads, and they were on rails. They're so big, just enormous. Sometimes we forget how the scope of how modern this war was compared to we you know, you picture the Civil War with the muskets and the little 12-pound cannons and everything, but there was, you know, these big artillery pieces. There was armored ships floating around in the water. There was armored caravans. There was air warfare with balloons. These pontoon bridges quickly built to cross rivers, to move an army across the river. These field artillery pieces. Covered wagons carrying supplies, tents, mess supplies. Oh, look at that huge 15-inch gun used in defense of Washington, D.C. Just amazingly huge. Trenches and very, very miserable. I think by 1864 the war just had gotten miserable. Just when you have men in the trenches, you know, with water coming up, soaking their clothes constantly, getting trench foot, and there's General William Sherman. Here's a story about when I would come back to the South to visit my family a long time ago, back in the 70s and 80s. When we would drive through the country with some of my older relatives, they would look at if they ever saw a chimney, you know, out in the distance, just the brick chimney with the house long gone. They'd say Sherman went through here, because Sherman had burned through everything in the South. What is that monster? The Wizard Cannon. I don't think I've ever seen this picture. Look at that thing. Unbelievable. Gosh, that cannon got hit by a shell and blew up. A Parrott rifle. It says the muzzle burst. It might have been poorly loaded. I told you about the balloons. They used balloon warfare, aerial warfare. Let me get some coffee here real quick. Not they didn't shoot out of it, but they directed fire from the balloons, and a telegraph would connect from the ground to the balloons. So it was aerial warfare, aerial reconnaissance, and so forth. These old pictures. Just imagine, this is our country today, and imagine seeing, scenes like this where, you know, war is being made in our own country against our own people, and you have gunboats out there, and like a torpedo. With the same trip that I went to see Fort Sumter, I also saw the Hunley, Confederate submarine that blew up some ships. So there was submarine warfare too. Here's another picture of a balloon. The Merrimack was it's actually, I think they renamed it the Virginia, but it was a Confederate gunboat that they turned into an ironclad. They took originally a wooden ship, and then they covered it in iron plating, and then they sent it out, and it just attacked the sail ships from the Union until the Union devised the Monitor, which was another gunboat that was even more like a shingle with a turret on top, and then it was a stalemate. They went out and dueled in the harbor and or the bay, but it was just a stalemate. They just lobbed shells against each other. The old compass. Coffee. There's Custer. Yesterday I watched a movie I hadn't seen in a long time on YouTube. It was called Son of the Morning Star, and it came out in the 90s on TV, around the same time as Dances with Wolves. And it was about General Custer and the Battle of the Little Bighorn, and then the time around that battle. And a lot of people, I think people were kind of divided on it, but I thought it was a pretty good depiction of Custer as what he was, probably close to what he was like. If you get a chance, it's a 3-hour movie. These guys were very still, but you can see the man behind them was moving, which shows that there was actually he was probably standing still for a while, because with the shutter speeds of those old cameras back then, many people might have passed back, but behind them and wouldn't even be seen. So this guy was probably standing or moving very slowly. You do see he's blurry. Oh, there we go again. We got we have the loud engine out there. There always has to be one when I'm doing a video. There's George Meade, the Union general at the Battle of Gettysburg. This is a picture of Abraham Lincoln, and he's right there. It doesn't look like him, does it? This is right after he delivered the Gettysburg Address. from an angle, from a view we never see him at. I think that's Lookout Mountain in Chattanooga because I've been there. I have lots of old reprints of Harper's Weekly, and there's lots and lots of pictures like that in it, where the sketch artists would go out there. And we really couldn't put photographs in newspapers back then. So the sketch artists would do sketches and send them back, and then they would do engravings from the sketches and print them in the papers. So there's a really good miniseries that came out in the 80s called The Blue and the Gray, and it was about sketch artists from the South, and he wanted to work for Harper's Weekly, but because he was a journalist, he couldn't support either side of the war. So his friends were in the North, and his best friend was a Union officer, and his family was in the South fighting for the Confederacy. So he was torn between the two. It was really a good miniseries. This view of Antietam, that's a stereo set. So if you had stereoscopic lenses, you could look at that in 3D. A stereo pair. See all the bayonets? Here's an interesting story. Back in the 60s, my dad was somewhere. He was at a store, an antique store, and or just a junk store, and he was looking around, and he saw that they had a can of paint open, and they were stirring it with this metal stick. And he said, "What are you stirring that paint with?" And they're like, "I don't know. It's just some stick we found." Well, he said, "Can I buy it?" And they said, "Sure, you can have it for 50 cents. Well, when my dad bought it and brought it home and cleaned all the paint off of it, it was a Civil War bayonet. It stamped U.S. It was a bayonet for a Springfield rifle, and he still has it. Harper's Weekly again. I'm not trying to be a pain here, but so far I'm not seeing a lot of the artifacts. They haven't really come up yet. I'm just seeing a lot of pictures. I've seen a few pictures I haven't seen, but a lot of these I've seen because I recognize them and I can point out details in them. Famous Union commanders. Famous Confederate commanders. That appears to be Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, and Beauregard. That's an odd pick for the one in the middle. He was the commander at the First Bull Run, but he lost the Battle of Shiloh. Some people even say he was one of the worst generals of the war. I don't know if I would go that far. Of course, U.S. Grant. Oh, I hate that. Okay. It is, yeah. The students are back in town, and they have brought their ridiculous cars. His real name was Hiram Ulysses Grant, and his initials were Hug, and he didn't like that. So when he went to West Point, and someone put the wrong name on his card, he didn't argue. And they changed his name to Ulysses Simpson Grant, which was absolutely not his name. It was like his mother's maiden name or something like that. There's an old spy wheel. a Union blacksmith shop. And I'm sure they were pretty busy, with, especially with cavalry units, wagon wheels, and all the other sort of things they had to take care of. Here's another stereo pair of an artist, sketch artist, Alfred Wald, who was recognized as the best sketch artist of the Civil War. And I think that John Geyser, the fictional character, well, John Geyser is not exactly a fictional character, but the character in The Blue and the Gray is based somewhat on him. However, there's a book called Reflections on the Civil War by Bruce Catton that depicts the real John Geyser, who was a Union soldier who had a sketchbook. And when they, the miniseries changed it around a lot and turned John Geyser, the real man, into this journalist from the South, and based him very much on him, even down to the way he dressed. John wore the boots like that, the long coat like that, the hat like this, the hat like that. The only difference is he didn't have the beard. Look at that train overturned. Clara Barton, leader of the effort to bring hospital supplies to the battlefield above. There's an old surgical kit. If you got shot in the leg, chances are you would lose your leg in the Civil War. The soft lead bullets with a low muzzle velocity generally resulted in losing a limb. Orphan boys of Civil War soldiers. The hospital train. Harper's Weekly. Cavalry carbines. Fall of General Lyon. Ooh, that's a creepy picture. Richmond newsboy announces the rebel success. That's a particularly creepy picture. General Grant's here. This is a fairly famous photograph because there's a picture of this soldier in life. They use it to great effect in the first episode of the Civil War documentary by Ken Burns. They show a studio portrait of him alive, and then they show this picture of the same man dead. There's not very many instances of that because photography was still very rare back then. It did explode during the war because of the... it turned into a huge industry. That appears to be the Derringer that was used to assassinate President Lincoln. You see this crack? That's because these were glass plate negatives on these old pictures. And if the glass plate cracked, they had to develop it all fat anyway. So there would be the crack inside the picture. I think we're getting to some of the artifacts now. Inauguration of Abraham Lincoln, some daguerreotype frames, a pair of calfskin gloves. But that's McLean. John Burns. That's the hero of Gettysburg. I thought that was William McLean. Sorry, he was a man who picked up a rifle, fought for the North during the Battle of Gettysburg. Sort of became a folk hero. This was a time when they were trying to make folk heroes up. They were trying to, because people were getting sick of the war by 1864. They were trying to get people rallied around what was becoming a very unpopular war. Another stereo pair of Bell Boyd, a Confederate spy. That is Rose Greenhow. There's a movie about her. It had Christopher Reeve. He played Alan Pinkerton. Highly fictionalized movie about her. This picture is interesting. They tried to restage it in the movie Gettysburg. They posed just like that, and then they had them talk. So, the commandant of Andersonville being executed. A political cartoon. At this point, the war was pretty much, the tide had turned against the Confederacy. It pretty much had turned at the Battle of Gettysburg. That was about it. There's a mortar. A rail gun. Some daguerreotypes. You've ever seen a daguerreotype? They look like a mirror when you look at them, and the image is on a mirror-like surface. I wanted to get one taken when we were in London, but there's only one guy in England who does them now. They were expensive, so we couldn't do that. The rope used to hang the Lincoln conspirators. Another cracked negative. Imagery of the lost cause. That's a whole other video talking about all of that. And that about wraps up the book. Oh, I almost had to sneeze there. Anyway, interesting. I didn't see a lot of the artifacts they were talking about in it. Nothing that I hadn't already seen before, but nonetheless, fairly interesting. And I hope you enjoyed the flip through and the discussion. So, Civil War is one of my favorite subjects to study. So, this is certainly not a bad thing to have in my collection. But either way, I hope you liked the video. And until next time, click the bell icon. Please rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you later. Bye.